Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Welcome to another episode of the Worth Listening podcast. I'm your girl, Lauryn Williams, a certified financial planner, and I'm always joined by certified financial planner Chloe Moore. And we love to bring you what we call the Know Better, Do Better series. And so right now we're talking about what happened in 2025, or what is happening in 2025. A lot of people started the new year just kind of like shocked and amazed at all the different changes that were happening in the world, the economy, different layoffs, things that are going on in the government. And we wanted to just be able to provide some peace and solace to people in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty, where people get analysis paralysis because of that uncertainty. People are dealing with mental health issues related to it. And so today we are going to be talking about how to navigate a layoff, because it has been real in these layoff streets, hasn't it, Chloe?
Yes, definitely.
And so we talk about, at the top of every show, trends, taxes, and tea. Chloe is our masters of trend, taxes, and tea. Sometimes she gives a little bit of tea, what's going on in pop culture, how it relates to our finances, how to save some money on taxes, how to save some money on anything. Or sometimes just like I said, what's a little bit trendy right now. So Chloe, what do you have for us today?
Yes, I saw an interesting Wall Street Journal article recently, and it basically said that it's no longer pays to switch jobs. One of the things that I used to tell younger people all the time is make sure that you're changing jobs pretty consistently, because a lot of times you have a better chance of getting a raise or higher income from leaving jobs than you do staying. And there was a lot of studies that showed that. But now, according to the latest federal data, the salary difference between those who stay in their roles and those who change jobs has collapsed to its lowest levels in 10 years. So, most people who stay in their job increase their wages by 4.6% in January and February, and those who switch jobs only receive slightly more at 4.8%. There's typically been a much higher gap there for people who switch jobs.
This is interesting. See, if you don't know me very well, I've never had a real job. I worked at Wendy's when I turned 16, quit that, started working at Subway for a bit, and then switched back to Wendy's for a while. And that was the extent of my W-2 income and working for somebody. After that, I was always an entrepreneur. So I have navigated this with clients, but I haven't really navigated this on my own. But it's interesting to see that these numbers are saying like, hey, maybe staying put makes more sense than jumping around. Because definitely that shopping around it even is still something that people talk a lot about. Is like every few years, just like see what you're worth out in the market, so that even if you like where you work, you have some numbers to be able to compare to be able to try to get that, higher raise, or make sure you're just keeping up with, like you said, market income. And that's something I know a lot of people of color don't do. And also women, there's a frequent stat around the idea that women see one thing on a job resume and like, oh, I'm not qualified for this. Whereas a man might have 5 or 6 things on a job qualification and apply for it anyway. So if we're already not applying for jobs that we are probably well qualified for, then we're definitely not asking for raises within the job that we're in. But we got to stop being so passive, y'all. We got to go out here and make this money, honey. And apparently it's now by staying put and not switching jobs.
Yeah. And of course, it depends on the industry or what level you're in. I mean, I've seen it, with clients that I've had people voluntarily leave their jobs, people get laid off, and they are people who are just wanting to leave their current jobs and looking around and realizing the market's not so great and the grass is not always greener.
Absolutely. What was our quote last week about the grass? It was, there was one recently about the grass, like, if the grass is greener, they got to put more water on it. That was the summary of the quote. So be mindful of that, people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, today we're talking how to navigate a layoff. And so there's a bunch of different things you should be thinking about. So first, if you have been laid off, I am sorry to hear that, but know that you're not alone. I think sometimes we get wrapped up in our own kind of sadness or guilt or shame or, things that are going on in our lives. And, rightfully so, like we should be our number one priority. But we forget that there are people all around us that are suffering from the same thing. And there's just kind of like power in knowing that you're not alone. And so, believe you me, right now, you are not alone as it relates to layoffs. I did a speaking engagement in late last year for student loans, and the whole company has ceased to exist now. So a young lady reached out to me and told me that she had been laid off and, was asking me some questions about her particular situation. And then I followed up with that. She followed up it's like a couple of weeks later and was like, yeah, just, as an update, the whole company has been dismantled. So that's hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people. I'm not quite sure, but are without jobs. So today we're going to give you some tips. So Chloe, where do we start here? If you've been laid off, what do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, the first thing is you'll typically receive a letter from your employer. They'll tell you verbally and then they'll give you a formal letter explaining everything. And in some cases, you probably would receive some sort of severance package. And so that's, basically they'll pay you a lump sum for a certain number of months or weeks, depending on how long you've been with the company, what position you're in. You want to review that carefully before you sign and agree to it. If you have any concerns about any foul play or misfair treatment, you want to contact an attorney. If you have those concerns, maybe that attorney can help you with those packages. In some cases, you can negotiate. Again, it depends on if you're, have seniority, if you're a high performer, what position you're in, how long you've been with the company, that kind of thing. But there are several things that you can negotiate when you have a severance package. Some of those things could be, the timing of when you're officially leaving the company, your pay, so how much they're paying you out, continuing certain benefits. If you have equity compensation as a tech employee, you can sometimes negotiate the vesting of those benefits or expiration dates if you have stock options. And there's different career resources that the company can offer you. There's lots of things that you can negotiate.
100%. So thing number one is negotiate. You don't have to just accept the package that is given to you, which so many people do. They're just like, well, this looks okay. It's better than nothing. Like you said, you're sad, your mind is swirling at the time, but it behooves you to at least ask because closed mouths do not get fed. And so, as Chloe mentioned, there's a bunch of different things to be thinking about as it relates to this negotiation. And the worst thing that happens is they say no. Like, doesn't mean that they take the whole package off the table just because you asked. So don't be afraid to put it out there and say like, hey, I was just wondering if I could get blah, blah, blah instead of blah, 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 or a little bit more of this. You know what your personal financial situation is. If you're listening to this podcast, you're trying to get your finances organized, or, maybe someone referred this podcast to you so that you can start getting your finances organized. But sometimes you're just kind of completely caught off guard. A lot of people in America are still living paycheck to paycheck, don't have the financial knowledge or expertise to be able to have, an emergency fund and some of the other things we talk about. And so this is your time to like, hey, I know I need to pay bills next month and I'm not going to be able to pay bills next month without negotiating XYZ. Don't be afraid to ask for what exactly it is that you need.
Absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind too, I know a lot of people are getting excited about working for companies that have unlimited PTO. One of the catches of working with a company that has unlimited PTO is that you will not receive a payout. So if you have a set number of PTO days and you have accumulated a bunch of days, your company's typically required to pay you out those days to you. But if you have unlimited PTO, there is no payout.
Yeah, actually, this one got me as an employer. So, we run small businesses, so we don't have a lot of employees, and you have to set up all this paperwork on your own when you do decide to hire someone. But my employee decided to move on actually for more money somewhere else. And she was like, well, what are we going to do about PTO? And I was like, what do you mean? What are we going to do about PTO? Like, you're quitting. Like, and yeah, then I learned that it was a standard thing for, some people to get paid out their PTO. And I didn't put anything in my policies about that. And so not wanting to be a jerk, even though I was like, oh man, I feel like I already gave her a pretty good, like, It wasn't really even a severance. It was just like an agreement for how we were going to close things down. And it was like, because this wasn't addressed, I felt like I should pay it out versus just being like, nope, not doing it. And so that cost me a little bit extra money. But yeah, you definitely want to know because, like you said, if you're the employee and like you said, as she was, that works to your favor.
Yeah. Another thing is unemployment benefits. So if you're being laid off, I would say apply as soon as possible. Processing times can vary. If there's a mass layoff, there's a lot of people filing for unemployment at the same time. So, it could take, weeks or a month or more, maybe to even start that application process and get the application processed. So then in order to file, you just go to your state's unemployment office. It's typically an online application that you can fill out pretty easily. And then you want to keep up with any ongoing requirement. So for some states, you may have to, do reports to show that you're looking for a job. So, there's something that you have to submit on a regular basis to continue receiving those benefits. Something else to keep in mind is unemployment is taxable income. So you can set it up to get taxes withheld from your unemployment benefits. But if not, just make sure that you understand that, you will owe taxes on that, and that has to be filed on your tax return the following year.
I feel like a lot of people missed this one during COVID, like where,
Yeah.
people were taking unemployment left and right and didn't really understand how it worked. And then we're filing that following year's return and was like, wait, what? Hold on. But I ain't had no job. And it's like, yeah, but that was income. And it was, yeah, not earned income, but it was earned income, if you will. It was treated like that at least.
Yeah. And then if you have any other income, or if you're still, receiving income from your previous employer, if you work something out, that could reduce, your unemployment benefits that you receive.
Absolutely. The other thing I would think about too is side hustles. A lot of times people are like, oh, well, I'm unemployed. This is, not my full income. And you go out and you want to do something else, or, it's just like you said, the nature of the world that we live in. Sometimes you always have a side hustle and we're trying to get as much money as possible while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next. Side hustles or other types of like earned income I'm going to say could, because not in all states does it work the same, but reduce your unemployment benefits and are likely to reduce your unemployment benefits, which is where, like, people are still operating in cash, doing stuff under the table. Not my business, not getting in it, not recommending that. But if you earn income, just beware that it can reduce your unemployment.
Yeah. So another thing to think about is the big bad B word, budget. And so you might need to adjust some things from your cash flow. So if you're going from having, especially a very high salary, or if you're, if you're a couple and the person earning the most, is losing their job, you have to make some serious adjustments. So think about what you can reduce. Like if you have any subscriptions or other recurring expenses that may not be necessary, or they're nice to haves, but not, required, you might need to reduce those things. Review your monthly expenses, see how much time you have with that severance payment and with your emergency fund, to see, how much runway do you have? How much time do you need to take to find a job? And what's realistic for you? Are you going to possibly run out of money before that could happen? And don't forget things like, insurance or property taxes, or things that might be non-monthly expenses. People often forget those things. And so you'll have a random, $1,000 or $1,500 that pops up, as a bill that you have to pay. So don't just think month to month, really look out for the past year to see, what are you spending money on and what do you need to survive?
100%. And like you said, if you've been listening to us for a while, we are always talking about this emergency fund. Nobody has ever been angry that they had cash sitting off to the side when they actually needed that cash. So I'm a little bit of a different school or mindset when it comes to the emergency fund. I do 3 times whatever your take home pay is, because people always like to go off of their monthly expenses and then they start kind of like, oh, well, this doesn't count. Oh, well, this is da da da. Like, well, I wouldn't really. And before you know it, they're only saving, maybe half of what they're bringing home as what they're calling their emergency fund. If you have an emergency fund that's at least 3 times what you're bringing home, then you have more than what are your expenses, because some of that we would imagine you are saving. Some of it is going, for various different things. It's not all like mandatory expenses. And that's the minimum. Three months is like my absolute minimum. My recommended is 6. So there's like on the internet, you'll see 3 to 6 months of expenses. I'm 3 to 6 months of what your take home pay is. And we can definitely make a case for going beyond that. I know during COVID, a lot of people went to a 1 year emergency fund, and now they have a lot more runway because they, have that. So like you say, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get a job. You might have experienced some burnout. You might be thanking your lucky stars secretly that you're laid off. You're like, "Whoo, I needed a break." Like, "Oh, this is not a good thing. Like, I'm so happy I gotta get up and go to work tomorrow." But then you start looking at this budget and you're like, "Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do?" And so, like I said, we're here now. If you've been laid off, we got to work with what you have. But think about like what expenses are the expenses that are important to you, because sometimes too it's like therapy. Like that's something that's not frequently covered by insurance nowadays, and it is something that we would probably say is like a little bit discretionary. But if your mental health is not good right now because you've been laid off, you might need that therapist, which is why having more than like expenses, like just being able to keep the roof over your head and keep yourself fed, gives you a little bit of flexibility to be able to say which things are important as you try to cut back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing to think about too is if you have, debt and you're afraid of missing payments or messing up your credit as a result, go ahead and contact those creditors if and make arrangements before things get out of hand. There are, some depending on what type of debt you have, who your creditor is, there could be, things that you can do to pause payments temporarily or just make some kind of arrangement so that your credit's not negatively affected.
100%. Like I said, closed mouths don't get fed. So don't just kind of stick your head in the sand, get into bed, be depressed. Be active about these things because you'd be surprised how you can still come out on top if you just put in a little bit of work on the front end and saying, like, hey, this is my situation. What options do I have? Is there some sort of hardship hold that you can put on my things so that it doesn't get reported in my credit? I've been a good customer up to this point. Yeah, it's an excellent thing to be thinking about. The other thing I would say is like be thinking about how you can generate some other income in the short term. So we talked about these side hustles. Your car still works and it's running fine. Like don't be too proud to cut on Uber Eats or Uber or Lyft or whatever it is that you need to do. If there's something you know how to build, if within your job you were kind of a high paid executive, or you're just a good earner and Uber's not going to cut it for you, maybe some consulting work would make a lot of sense. Figuring out how to get yourself out there and use your expertise so that one, you don't get rusty, but two, you're also able to bring in some extra money would be great. The other thing I like to tell my clients to do is sell stuff. I actually just started this process for myself yesterday. It's like it's just time for that spring cleaning. What do I not need? What have I accumulated as I look around that I don't actually need in my life that might be valuable to somebody else? Offloading some items and turning those things back into cash that you can use would be a great thing. And also, like somebody else gets to use the thing that they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to think about is if you're living off of your savings, transfer a set amount from your savings to your checking account each month or even twice a month so you maintain a consistent budget. One thing that people do all the time that really messes them up and they kind of blow through their savings a lot quicker than they would like to is they just transfer money as they need it, or they just put a big lump sum in their checking account and just start spending. And that doesn't hold you accountable to making sure that you are making this money last for however many months you need it to last.
100%. And this is also something I recommend for like my entrepreneurs. It's like sometimes it's hard to stabilize your income because it's like so it fluctuates so much. That is great advice. Just like here's a set amount. This is what my paycheck was before, or like you said, minus these expenses that I've already taken out. Like this is what I should be able to live off of. So you can look at your account and see. And I would also, this is a great time to put your credit cards down. Just give them a break. Credit cards are made so that we can go into credit card debt. They're made to feel like very like easy to swipe and keep on going. And when you had your regular income coming in, maybe you were able to cover your credit card bill every month, but this is not the time to kind of be swiping and going and then kind of like, oh crap, like what am I going to do? And I have a lot less to work with. So starting to use your debit card would be a great idea as well, so that you can see that savings amount going down or your checking account amount going down and kind of keep yourself within some parameters so that you don't go overboard and you're not struggling as your accounts get lower if you haven't found a job yet.
Yeah. And then another question that we always get as financial planners is what to do with their 401k. One of the things to think about there is you do have options, but you don't have to make a decision right away. unless you have a very small balance, typically like less than 5 or 10,000, you can most likely leave the money where it is. So don't make any quick decisions. Don't, cash it out. Don't immediately just think you have to roll it over. You can just leave it where it is and wait to make the decision that's best for you long term.
100% on this don't cash it out piece. Another thing that plagues the community of color is that we just don't see the value in the 401k. No one has talked to us about it. We didn't really get it. You might have only been putting in like enough to get the employer match. And so you're just like, oh, this is money. Like, I don't have this job. I don't have this account no more. Let me use it. And that's not what it's for. That's not how it was meant to be used. Just because you don't have the job doesn't mean we don't need to stop saving for retirement. And we shouldn't be diminishing what we have already saved, because at some point we're going to pick back up. Like, we might be on the pause right now while we're looking for a new job. But yeah, I've seen so frequently where somebody's just like, well, I left the job and, they asked me what I wanted to do with it. And I was like, I'm gonna just take this money and run. But also there's penalties because you're under the age 59 and a half. There's taxes. And those are things sometimes people don't plan for, even if it's just a little bit of money. So do not cash it out.
Yeah. And another thing to think about too, a lot of people often, against our advice, take out loans against their 401k, sometimes, to buy a house or do different things. If you are laid off, or if you leave that job, you have to pay that loan back within a certain period of time. Otherwise, it's going to be considered a taxable distribution. So be careful about taking out loans, especially, if you are at risk of being laid off, or if you are planning on leaving your job anytime soon.
100%. I feel like this is something that's caught a lot of people off guard too with these recent layoffs, is loans that they had taken out. And what I see people take loans out a lot for is like home down payments, pay off credit card debt, fill in the blank. You want to try to avoid taking a loan from your 401k as much as humanly possible. So.
Yeah. And then, there are different pros and cons of keeping the money inside a 401k or rolling it to an IRA. Just you have to review the investment options that are available to you, review the fees that are inside of your 401k. If they're pretty low, it might just be better just to keep it where it is. When you start at a new company, you can always move the old 401k money into the new 401k and keep your IRA intact, or just don't have an IRA. And if you're making backdoor Roth contributions as a high income earner, once you roll money from a 401k to an IRA, you lose that ability to make those backdoor Roth contributions. So there's definitely a lot of considerations there. And if someone's pushing you to roll over your 401k right away, they're probably trying to sell you something or make money off of whatever they're telling you to roll it into.
100%. Beware of the commission-based people who are trying to earn a dollar off the dollars that you already set up, ready to go. Might not be the best option. All right, let's talk employee benefits. I mean, we talked a little bit about some of the employee benefits, but I mean, a 401k is an employee benefit, severance, and some of the things that come with the severance have, kind of benefits mixed into those. But what other things from an employee benefit standpoint should people be thinking about as, layoffs come their way? I think that comes to mind for me is like insurance.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have health insurance through your company, then COBRA allows you to continue that coverage up to 18 months. You're typically going to be responsible for the full premium. So, sometimes you might, as a single person, you might not have to pay a premium, or you might have a, extremely low premium. Your company is often supplementing that. And so there's an employer portion and an employee portion of that premium. So you're typically responsible for the entire thing if you go on to COBRA.
100%. This was one that caught me off guard as well as I was trying to get my life together. This was pre-financial planner. As I was leaving track and field, my insurance had been covered the whole time, never paid a dollar on it. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, you can keep this insurance if you like, but also here's the premium. And they can charge you actually up to 102% of the premium. And the 2% is representative of administrative fees. So you want to be mindful of like what the real premium is. Should you be laid off if you've not been laid off? And then if you have been laid off, you might be like, wait, what? I was paying $40 a month and now I got to pay $4,000 a month. Like, which to that point, if it's just not affordable, you can also shop for a healthcare plan at healthcare.gov. There's some state ones, there's some federal ones. There's, if your income is low enough, which, like I said, you've just been laid off, you could qualify for some sort of subsidy. I will say they've changed the way that the subsidies work recently. And it's like, okay, you're telling us you qualify for this subsidy, but if you start making money again, maybe you didn't qualify for the subsidy. And now when it comes tax time rolls around, they charge you the full premium that you thought was being subsidized. So that's also something else to be aware of as you sort through your healthcare options.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that people often forget about is life insurance. So you typically have a group benefit with your company that they pay for. And so it might be one time salary, two times salary, or some flat dollar amount like 50,000 or 100,000. And in those cases, whenever you leave a company, that coverage goes away. And so that's one of the reasons why we tell people typically if you need coverage outside of what your company provides, get a policy outside of work so you don't lose all of your coverage. In some cases, if you have health issues where maybe you can't get coverage anymore, like if you had some major, health issue like cancer or something, or some pre-existing condition that might make it really costly, then, with that health insurance coverage, you can get a certain amount of supplemental coverage. And the amount that your company gives you, you don't have to qualify for health reasons to get it. So I'd say, get as much as you can. And if you still do need coverage, you might need to consider keeping that policy. So your company can allow you to take that policy with you, but you have to pay. And it could be costly, but depending on if you're unable to get insurance anywhere else, that might be your only way to get it.
Amen, amen, amen. And yeah, that asterisk right by is like they can allow you to take it with you. Frequently they don't. It just ends because your job ends, which is why, like you said, when you're working with a financial planner, they usually recommend an outside policy because at any point you lose your job and you don't have this life insurance through work, but you still need some life insurance because you don't know what you're going to do, or you want to become an entrepreneur, fill in the blank sort of thing. So yeah, it depends on what kind of cushy benefits you have or don't.
Yeah. Another thing is for those of you in tech who do have equity, if you have RSUs, any shares that have vested through your date of termination, those shares you can keep, and so you're able to keep those and hold on to them or sell them at any time in the future. But you will lose any shares that have not vested. That's something that you can possibly negotiate with your employer. And same thing with stock options. You typically have, if you haven't exercised all of your options, you have about up to 90 days after your date of termination to exercise, or you lose all of those stock options. So again, that's something else that could be negotiated. Typically, stock options expire 10 years after they were granted to you, but that time period really accelerates if you leave a company.
Yeah, and this is a huge deal too. Chloe is our equity comp expert. So if you have stock options, I suggest trying to hit her up if this is a situation that you're in. But so many people leave money on the table. Like you said, you're frustrated. Your head is spinning. You're trying to manage a billion things, but not managing your stock options appropriately during this time could result in you missing a great opportunity. Which also means sometimes you need to have like an appropriate amount of cash to be able to exercise the options. And that speaks to, like you said, type of emergency fund, how much cash you have on hand. I know there's like things called a cashless exercise, so maybe get a little bit of them. But like if your company blows up in the future and you didn't get to exercise these options, you're going to be looking like, you're going to have the boo-boo face is what we used to say. So don't be afraid to reach out. Like you said, it's a time where you're cutting back on expenses, but a financial professional may be well worth the expense to make sure that you're not leaving a bunch of money on the table and can help you navigate that. The other thing always with stock options is, there's tax implications for when you exercise, how you exercise, what you're exercising, et cetera. So the worst thing we would want you to do is like, oh, I'm gonna just do this and not really be thinking about what's gonna happen as a result of you doing it. And now, in addition to being laid off, you get hit with some sort of tax penalty or, bigger tax liability than you were thinking that following year.
Yeah, and with any of this, if you have any kind of deadlines, especially, with this 90-day, expiration date, a lot of people start contacting a financial planner when they have, they're 75 days in. It's really hard to get a quick turnaround and help decide what's best for you and your situation in that short period of time. So, it's best if you're working with someone when this all happens. But if not, contact an advisor or try to get help ASAP. So you're not, on a deadline.
100%. Don't be last minute Lauren, because that's gonna get you messed up, right? And then, like I said, some people are frustrated, like, "Oh my God, expires next week," and they're frustrated because you don't have an appointment. It's like, well, I have a whole book of clients, I have a whole bunch going on. I can't just squeeze you in, or they want to pay extra when I'm squeezing you in somewhere. And I'm like, you got to set your mind toward like you're gonna get the value of what you're given, and the person that's just like wide open and got nothing to do. It might be because they don't know what they're doing. But neither here nor there. Like, I digress. Let's talk about some ways to prepare for those people who have not been laid off. Like you said, hopefully we provided you with a bunch of information already, but you might be concerned about the idea of losing your job. I know that's still a big thing for a lot of government workers right now. It's like they show up every Monday and they're just like, oh God, is it my turn now? What can they be doing to be preparing?
Yeah, and we talk about a lot of this. I'd say definitely check out our first episode of this season. We talk about preparing for uncertainty, and so we do talk about a lot of these things. But just a quick recap: build up that emergency fund. Yeah, I'd say at least 6 months. You could possibly go up to 12. Maybe add some to that cushion if you already have an emergency fund. Pay off any debt, start looking at your budget now. Think about if something happens, what are those things that you could cut back if you needed to? Cut back some things that are unnecessary now and just get yourself in a better position so you have more money to save or more to pay off debt. So yeah, but just check out that episode. We talk about a lot of those good tips.
100%. All right. So as we wrap this up, I think just a few other tips that maybe are not like super closely related to money, but kind of like all these things, like you said, are always intertwined. So one thing I think of is like sprucing up your resume. If, you haven't done that in a while because you had this job that you got laid off from for a good bit, or even like I said, if you're trying to prepare, making sure your resume is ready to go. Which to that end, if you've been working at a place for a while, maybe your LinkedIn profile is kind of non-existent or looking real raggedy. That's definitely a way that people are getting jobs now. It's a real marketplace for actually finding work and people being able to talk to you about what is available to them. And so making sure that both your resume and your LinkedIn profile are up to date so that you can get yourself together is one tip that I would say. Chloe, what do you think?
Yeah, and definitely maintain, relationships with managers, coworkers. You might need a, reference down the road, network. Make a list of all the people that you know who could possibly help, in this time. Don't be afraid to ask for help. So, if you have people who are in similar positions to you, people who work at certain companies that maybe you like to work for, old managers, and just keep those lines of communication open so that people can help look out for job opportunities.
Yes, because they say your network is your net worth. And as corny as it sounds, I've definitely found it to be true. The people that I know that are willing to help me, willing to connect me, can speak to my character, have gotten me a lot more dollars in my pocket than, me going out and, cold calling, cold emailing, reaching out to people over the course of time. So definitely be mindful of that.
Yeah, and it's okay to take a break. Losing a job is really hard, and sometimes you have to go through the grieving process. But don't put off a job search. Some people get really nice severance packages. I've seen 6 months or 12 months, and they get these bonus payouts and all of this extra money, and so they think, okay, well I have all of this emergency fund savings and I have severance. I can wait for a year before I can start looking for a job. It could take you a year to find a job or more. So don't put off that job search. The best thing that could happen is you find another job and you're still getting your severance money. And so, you kind of have double paychecks coming in. So that could, be more money that you could put away towards retirement or towards other goals. So yeah, definitely continue the search.
I love that advice. Like you said, it is okay to take a break. It is okay to be sad. These were people that you were going to. We spend a lot of time at our jobs. You wake up, general Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's a huge chunk of your life that just like overnight got wiped out. And so, while Instagram and everything is telling us like, "Ooh, I ain't got to go to work today," and I feel so great about it, like you might really be grieving the social aspect of it, the stimulation that you had, having a process and what's it called, a schedule each day. it is all right to take a break and just be like, gosh, darn, I love this thing. And now it has been, what am I going to do next? But also to Chloe's point, like, don't YOLO all the way until you don't have no more money left. And you're like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? The best thing you can do for yourself is start looking, as soon as you feel comfortable so that you have something else lined up already ready to go. And like you said, then maybe you got that double income for a bit and you're like, really like, hey, I found a new job that I like. Or maybe you, like you said, you take a lot longer because you want to be a little bit more discerning so that you're like, oh gosh, I was in a toxic work environment. I want to ask these questions the next time around before I get a job. And you can start to see those red flags instead of just taking any old thing because you need the income. You can be a lot more discerning and try to make sure you find yourself the right fit by getting started kind of more quickly than sooner rather than later, I should say.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally, just take care of yourself. Create a routine. Don't sleep in until noon every day and mope around the house. Get out, exercise, take walks, do some volunteer work. Just try to do things to read, keep your mind stimulated. Like Lauryn said before, if you can't afford it, definitely continue therapy or, talk to people, find support groups and really, keep that routine because that helps with your mental health.
100%, which leads us to today's quote, which I feel like ties in nicely to some of the things we were just talking about. It says, some changes look negative on the surface, but you will soon realize that space is being created in your life for something new to emerge. And this is Eckhart Tolle. Did I say it right, Tolle?
I think so.
I can't even say your name right. And so I just love this, like you said, because we think of a layoff as the most horrible thing on the planet. Like I said, a lot of people are stressed about the idea, about the possibility of it all. But it's like, hey, if I'm financially prepared, then that's one thing I don't have to be as stressed about it. But even if I wasn't financially prepared, it's like, this might be the slap in your face that you need to like, all right, next time around, we're not going to be here. We're not going to be in this financial situation. And so this is where you take a good look at your finances and start seeing where you can make some changes and how you want to live your life. But also like, do I want to live in this city? Do I want to live in this state? Do I want to live in this country? Last episode that we did together was about fleeing the country. So don't think of this as a negative thing. Like I said, don't get in your bed and mope all day. Think about how this change could help you create the life that you want and all the new things that could be coming your way that are much better and awesome. This may be a space that needed to be created for you so that you could have the next better thing come up in life and be much happier.
Yeah, it could definitely be a redirection to something better.
100%. All right. Of course, we always put all our resources in the show notes. So if you want to check those out, we've got one more set of podcasts coming your direction. And to wrap up the Know Better, Do Better series for this go round, we're going to be talking about good financial habits. And so we've kind of made a checklist of things that you need to be thinking about. So like I said, we started about preparing for that uncertainty. Now it's just like, hey, what do we need to do in light of what we don't know is going to happen? How can we just maintain good financial habits over the course of time? And so we'll be bringing you a couple episodes about that. And then we'll be taking a break for a bit.
All right.
Okie dokie. Until next time, good people.
Bye.